The 6 o'clock sun had barely risen above the horizon, tinting the sky a timid orange, when Dandara was already awake. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the small kitchen of her home, a haven of warmth and simplicity amidst the hustle and bustle of the outskirts. At 35, Dandara carried in her eyes the wisdom of someone who had faced many battles, and in her smile, the resilience of someone who knew that life, though hard, was a gift to be lived intensely. A single mother of 2 children, little Miguel, 7, and Sophia, 14, she was the pillar of her family, the driving force that propelled them forward each new day. Her job as a cleaner at the Almeida mansion, in the city's upscale neighborhood, was her livelihood. The house, an imposing mansion with meticulously manicured gardens and interiors that looked like something out of a design magazine, was a world apart. There, amid crystal chandeliers and marble floors, Dandara dedicated herself diligently, transforming dust and clutter into a spotless environment. For her, cleaning was not just a chore, but an art, an act of care and organization that was reflected in her own life. Every gleaming corner, every polished surface, was a testament to her professionalism and dedication. Mrs. Veronica Almeida, the matriarch of the house, was a middle-aged woman with an air of superiority that seemed to have been carved into her features. Her eyes, often cold and distant, regarded Dandara with a mixture of distrust and a certain unease. At first, their relationship was strictly professional, marked by clear instructions and a respectful distance. However, over time, Dandara's vibrant presence, her unquestionable efficiency, and, above all, her contagious joy began to create a silent friction. Dandara, with her dark skin and frizzy hair always braided, brought with her an energy that contrasted with the calculated coldness of the mansion. She sang softly while vacuuming, told funny stories to the other household staff, and sometimes even cracked a joke with the family driver. This brilliance, this authenticity, seemed to bother Mrs. Veronica, who saw Dandara's behavior as an affront to the social hierarchy she so cherished. "Dandara, please keep it quiet when cleaning the living room. My guests could arrive at any moment, and I don't want them to think the house is a construction site," Mrs. Veronica would say, her tone bordering on reprimanding, even when Dandara was merely humming a song. Small gestures, disapproving glances, and veiled comments began to become frequent. Mrs. Veronica seemed to be incessantly searching for flaws, for any slip-up that might justify her growing dislike. Dandara, for her part, tried to ignore it, focusing on her work and the certainty that she was doing her best. She knew her dignity wasn't tied to Mrs. Veronica's approval, but rather to her own conscience and her love for her family. However, a sense of unease was beginning to set in, a premonition that the peace in that house was about to be shattered by something darker. The days dragged on in the Almeida mansion, and with them, the tension in the air seemed to increase. Mrs. Veronica, previously only subtly critical, now seemed to have a magnifying glass trained on Dandara's every move. Small incidents previously ignored began to be noticed and, invariably, attributed to the cleaning lady. The first spark ignited when a small porcelain figurine, a miniature ballerina, adorning the living room bookshelf, disappeared. Mrs. Veronica, with an air of someone who had been expecting something like this, summoned Dandara to her office, a cold, impersonal room where the silence was broken only by the ticking of an antique clock. "Dandara, have you seen the porcelain ballerina?" Mrs. Veronica asked bluntly, her eyes fixed on Dandara's, as if trying to decipher every thought. Dandara, surprised, replied that no, that she had cleaned the bookshelf as usual, but didn't remember seeing the object. The answer didn't seem to satisfy her employer. "Strange," she murmured, more to herself than to Dandara. "It's always been there, and now, just as you're cleaning, it disappears." The insinuation was clear, and Dandara's heart sank. She felt the weight of the accusation, even without a direct word, and the injustice suffocated her. The dancer reappeared days later, forgotten in a drawer by one of Mrs. Veronica's children, but the incident left a mark, a seed of distrust planted in the environment. It wasn't long before other problems arose. A late arrival by Dandara, blamed on an emergency at Miguel's school, was met with a disapproving look and a scathing comment. "Lateness is unacceptable, Dandara. Your personal problems can't interfere with your work here." Mrs. Veronica seemed to forget that Dandara was a mother, that life sometimes presented unexpected challenges. To her, Dandara was just an employee, a cog in her domestic machine, and any deviation from the script was seen as a character flaw. Dandara's work, once praised, began to be the target of constant criticism. "That corner isn't clean enough, Dandara. The dust is still visible. The mirrors are stained. You need to be more careful." Each remark was a blow, an attempt to undermine her confidence and professionalism. Dandara, who had always prided herself on her impeccable work, began to doubt herself. She spent overtime, redoing tasks, striving for perfection that seemed unattainable in Mrs. Veronica's eyes. The joy that once accompanied her during cleaning was replaced by a tense silence, a constant concern not to make mistakes, not to give rise to further accusations. Conversations with the other employees also changed. Before, there was camaraderie, laughter, and venting. Now, a cautious silence hung in the air when Dandara approached. The fear of being associated with her, of being subject to the same suspicion, drove them apart. Dandara felt isolated, an island amid a sea of insinuations and sidelong glances. Mrs. Veronica, with her ability to manipulate and sow discord, was succeeding, transforming Dandara into a pariah, a figure under constant scrutiny. The shadow of suspicion loomed over her, threatening to swallow her whole, but Dandara, deep down, knew she was innocent, and that certainty was the only thing keeping her going. The atmosphere in the Almeida mansion became unbearable for Dandara. Each day was a test of her patience and dignity. Mrs. Veronica's small insinuations had turned into veiled accusations, and the work environment, once a place of dedication, was now a minefield of distrust. Dandara felt the weight of the stares, the whispers that ceased when she approached, the coldness that enveloped her like a heavy cloak. But nothing prepared her for the approaching storm. It was on a rainy Tuesday that the unthinkable happened. A diamond necklace, a priceless family heirloom, disappeared from Mrs. Veronica's safe. Panic gripped the house. Hysterical screams from her employer echoed through the hallways, and the police were called immediately. Dandara, who was in the kitchen preparing lunch, felt a chill run down her spine. She knew with a painful certainty that the blame would fall on her. And so it was. Mrs. Veronica, her eyes bloodshot with anger and tears, pointed her finger at Dandara. It was her. It had to be her. No one else had access to the room. Her mistress's voice was like thunder, and her words were lightning bolts that struck Dandara. The police, though skeptical at first, were swayed by Mrs. Veronica's vehemence and the family's social standing. Dandara was taken to a secluded room, where she was interrogated for hours. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. She vehemently denied the accusations, explaining her routine, her movements, but her words seemed to fade into the air, echoless. The public humiliation was the hardest blow. Mrs. Veronica insisted that all the household staff be present when Dandara was confronted again. "You, Dandara, who always acted so honest, so dedicated, how could you betray us like this?" Her employer's voice was filled with contempt, and the looks of the other employees, previously merely curious, were now judgmental. Dandara felt tears welling up, but she held them back. She wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing her crumble. Her dignity was the only thing she had left, and she would hold on to it with all her might. "I didn't steal anything, Mrs. Veronica. I'm an honest woman, and I would never do something like that," Dandara said, her voice cracking but filled with unshakable conviction. But her word, the word of a black cleaning lady, was worth little against that of a wealthy and influential woman. The emotional pressure was excruciating. The thought of being accused of theft, of having her name tarnished, of losing her job and, consequently, the support of her children was an almost unbearable burden. Her nights became sleepless, filled with anguished thoughts and fear of the future. Yet, amidst all this pain, a flame of resilience burned in her chest. Dandara knew who she was, and this certainty was her shield against the injustices of the world. She would not bow. She would fight to prove her innocence, not only to others, but to herself and, most importantly, to her children. The days following the accusation were the darkest of Dandara's life. The Almeida mansion, once her workplace, became a stage for humiliation and disrespect. She continued to go because she needed the paycheck, but each step was heavy, each glance a stab. Mrs. Veronica, satisfied with her victory, treated Dandara with even greater contempt, as if the cleaning lady's guilt were a universally accepted truth. The other employees, fearing their boss's wrath, avoided Dandara, creating a vacuum around her. Loneliness and injustice were constant companions. However, truth, like water, always finds its way. Mr. Almeida, a businessman more pragmatic than his wife, began to suspect the speed with which the blame was attributed to Dandara. He knew Mrs. Veronica had a history of prejudice and that the situation was, at the very least, convenient. She decided to investigate further on her own. She hired a private detective who discreetly began searching the mansion's surroundings and the lives of those who frequented the house. The twist came from where she least expected it. The detective discovered that Mrs. Veronica's nephew, a young man with serious debt problems and a gambling addiction, had visited the mansion on the day of the robbery. The young man, who had unrestricted access to the house and was familiar with the family's routine, was confronted. Cornered by the evidence, he confessed to the necklace's theft, revealing that he had sold the jewel to pay off an urgent debt. The news fell like a bombshell on the Almeida mansion. Dandara's innocence was proven. Mr. Almeida, with a mixture of relief and shame, summoned Dandara to his office. "Dandara, I'm so sorry. We discovered that the necklace was stolen by my nephew. You are free of any charges." The apology, though sincere on his part, rang hollow. Mrs. Veronica, present in the room, could barely look at Dandara. Her face was pale, and her arrogance, for a brief moment, gave way to profound embarrassment. She murmured a barely audible "I'm sorry," without any warmth or genuine remorse. Dandara heard the words, but her heart was heavy. Her innocence had been restored, but the wounds left open by distrust, humiliation, and prejudice ran deep. She looked at Mrs. Veronica, at Mr. Almeida, and realized that, even though the truth had come to light, nothing would fundamentally change. That environment, no matter how much it offered her a salary, would never give her the respect and dignity she deserved. In that moment, Dandara made a decision that would change the course of her life. She could no longer work in a place where her race and social status made her the target of unfounded suspicion. It was time to seek a new path, a path where she could be valued for who she truly was. Dandara's decision to leave the Almeida mansion wasn't easy. It meant giving up her only stable source of income, a huge risk for a single mother with 2 children. But dignity for her was worth more than any salary. As she said goodbye, Mr. Almeida, still embarrassed by the situation, offered her a small severance package, more as a settlement to avoid future problems than a gesture of true repentance. Dandara accepted, not out of gratitude, but strategically. That money, however small, would be the seed of her freedom. With the severance package in hand, Dandara knew she needed to act smartly. She didn't want just another cleaning job, where she would be subjected to the same prejudices and humiliations. She wanted something different, something that would give her control over her own destiny. It was then that an idea, long germinating in her mind, began to take shape, opening her own cleaning company. She was always praised for her work, her organization, and her attention to detail. Why not turn this skill into a business? The first step was to seek knowledge. Dandara, who has always valued education, enrolled in a night school course in small business management offered by a community institution. The classes were tiring after a full day of work. She had landed some cleaning jobs at other homes, but without the same workload. But she absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. She learned about financial planning, marketing, customer service, and most importantly, how to transform her passion for cleaning into quality service. Sophia, her teenage daughter, became her biggest supporter and, at times, her marketing assistant. With her social media savvy, she helped her mother create a simple but effective profile promoting Dandara's services. Miguel, the youngest, designed colorful logos and dreamed up the company's name. The family, united, embraced Dandara's dream. Nights were filled with plans, calculations, and the hope for a better future. Dandara started small, serving clients who knew her and trusted her work. Word of mouth was her best marketing. Her reputation for honesty, dedication, and excellence spread quickly. She invested the rest of her severance pay in quality cleaning products and basic equipment. Each satisfied client was a victory, each new contract a step toward realizing her dream. The company, which she named Dandara Limpieza y Cuidado, was not just a business. It was a symbol of her resilience, of her ability to transform adversity into opportunity. She was building not just a company, but a legacy of dignity and respect, a future where she and her children would be the protagonists of their own story. Years passed, and the small seed planted by Dandara blossomed into a robust, vibrant tree. Dandara Limpieza y Cuidado was no longer a distant dream, but a thriving and respected reality. Word of mouth, fueled by the excellence of her services and Dandara's integrity, led to exponential growth. From occasional odd jobs, she built a loyal client base who valued not only the impeccable cleaning but also the ethics and professionalism Dandara instilled in her team. She hired other women, many of them in similar situations to her own. Single mothers, heads of households, women seeking opportunities for dignified and respectful work. Dandara made a point of creating a distinctive work environment where each employee was valued, listened to, and respected. She offered training, fair wages, and, above all, a sense of community and mutual support. Her employees were not just employees, they were partners, and the company was an extension of her own family. She remembered well the humiliations she had suffered and vowed that none of her employees would ever experience anything like them. Miguel and Sofia, now young adults, were her greatest pride. Miguel, with his talent for numbers, helped manage the company's finances, while Sofia, with her creativity, handled marketing and communications. The company was a family project, built with love, dedication, and resilience. The house, once small and cramped, had been renovated and expanded, becoming a cozy and lively home, where laughter and lively conversations were the constant soundtrack. Time, once scarce and consumed by exhaustion from work and worries, was now a luxury Dandara could enjoy. She had time to watch her children grow up, for a leisurely family dinner, for a weekend at the beach. The dignity that had been denied her for so long was now a tangible reality. She was no longer the humiliated cleaning lady, but the successful businesswoman, the proud mother, the woman who, against all odds, built her own empire. One day, driving through an upscale neighborhood, Dandara saw the Almeida mansion. A small smile appeared on her lips. The house, once a symbol of her pain and humiliation, was now just a distant memory, a milestone on her journey. She had left that house not only with compensation, but with a valuable lesson: that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in strength of character, resilience of spirit, and the ability to transform one's own story. Dandara, the force that once disturbed, was now the force that inspired, living proof that dignity and honest work always find their way to success and happiness.